I stayed up until 10 p.m., watching YouTube on my laptop with a queue of clips ready to play. One featured my favorite basketball player, Larry Big Al Johnson, making an impressive long-range shot. I've known Big Al since college, where he was a star player. After turning pro, he joined the Visors, my hometown team in Virginia. Now retired, he hosts shows on Wiz TV. I watched his videos for nostalgia. One unexpected clip showed him dancing carnally with a beautiful blonde at a Miami club, my wife. The clip, just published, showed them kissing passionately. When I called Lee, she didn't answer. She was supposed to be at a Miami business meeting with our friend Bart Kovach. I called Bart for information. He confirmed they spent 3 days together and suspected they were involved romantically. Apologies were exchanged, and plans were made to confront Lee. Bart suggested she might still be at the hotel, just in a different room. He also mentioned that Big Al lived nearby. I don't want to discuss this with her. If she asks, I'll explain. Fair enough. Talk to you later. Lee and I first met in college during our 20s. It was in our penultimate year, during math class. Walking in, I noticed her drawing in her notebook, surrounded by shy, nerdy guys. I decided to sit next to her. She joked about the lack of competition, and we hit it off. I'm not a typical nerd. 1.73 meters tall, 68 kilograms, with brown eyes and hair. She seemed intrigued by my confidence. I introduced myself as Lee Martin. She jokingly remarked we wouldn't need to change monograms if we married. We laughed as we headed to the student union. Lee was a stunning 6-foot-tall blonde with green eyes, an average figure, and a smile that captivated me. I said, "You must have been surprised when none of the guys in class sat next to you." "Thank you." I was surprised. Usually I have to fend off guys. You exploited my insecurities, and now I can't dissuade you. I have another lesson in 20 minutes, but I'd like to invite you to dinner. Maybe tonight. Since we're in the same class, we should get to know each other better. No dinner. Sorry, I have a boyfriend and he won't like it. I had to try. Well, I hope to see you again. Me too. I like you. At least we'll see each other in class. We met in class twice a week, tackling the tough subject together. One day, I asked her about a problem, and she explained everything. After class, I asked about her experience with the course. "No, I'm good at math, and you? I need it for my chemistry major, but I struggle. Maybe you could give me some advice." "What is this, a joke? I have a boyfriend." "No, I respect that. I just need help. We can meet at a diner and go over subjects as if you were my tutor." "Fine. Diner at 4? Agreed. During our diner meetings, I got to know Lee much better. We hit it off, discussing topics beyond mathematics. One day, a large guy approached our table where our books lay. Lee introduced him as Rashad, her boyfriend. We shook hands. Rashad was a medium-built black man, around 5'8" and 100 kilograms. We closed our math books, and Rashad asked why I was taking the class with Lee and the nerds. I explained I needed it for my chemistry major and programming. We then discussed why certain majors required unrelated courses. Rashad revealed his interest in physical training, aiming to become a high school teacher or pursue hockey professionally. Lee aimed for a business career, drawn to the idea of making money. As the semester progressed, I saw more of Lee. I invited her and Rashad to dinner at my off-campus apartment, along with Rashad's neighbor Stephanie. Dinner went well, with fish stew, spinach salad, and dessert. Lee and Rashad left after playing bridge, surprisingly enjoying the game. Lee and I won, bonding over her unique bidding system. Stephanie stayed the night, but we both understood our relationship was purely physical, as she had a boyfriend back home. That evening proved pivotal when Lee invited me to a backup bridge tournament at the Army baseball field. I agreed, unaware of the unfolding drama. 2 days after our dinner, I spotted Stephanie and Rashad entering our building together. Intrigued, I followed them to Stephanie's floor. Unsure what to do, I observed from my room. Hours later, Rashad emerged, prompting me to visit Stephanie. She seemed flustered, but confessed she felt no regret. We discussed the situation, agreeing to let things cool off for a while to assess our feelings. The bridge tournament was enjoyable, though the revelation about Rashad and Stephanie lingered. Lee asked why I hadn't informed her. I explained Rashad hadn't made a decision. She understood. Later, she expressed a desire to come to my place, which I eagerly accepted. In the heat of the moment, passion overtook us. Lee's arousal matched mine, resulting in intense satisfaction. Despite my initial doubts, the connection between us felt undeniable. We shared a carnal moment, reaffirming our compatibility. She followed me. "Shower?" she asked in a sultry voice. We shared an carnal shower against the smooth wall before washing up and returning to bed, drifting off to sleep. In the morning, I rose and brushed my teeth. Lee joined me, and I offered her a spare toothbrush. After freshening up, we tended to my morning arousal. During breakfast, Lee asked, "Am I as good as Stephanie? Am I as good as she was?" We locked eyes before she grinned. "He's bigger, but you're better. Steph is good, but you're fantastic." From then on, we were inseparable. Lee practically moved in with me, despite Rashad's objections. He eventually found another partner and frequently visited Stephanie. During his senior year, Big Al moved into our building on the 4th floor. Sometimes I saw him with Stephanie, though they never lived together. We exchanged pleasantries until Steph invited us over for dessert one day, where Big Al was also present. We had a pleasant evening, though afterward we were no longer invited. Lee and I tied the knot at 20, fresh out of college. I landed a job as a programmer at the Pentagon, while Lee worked in advertising, aiming to influence government decisions. I inherited a house near work from my grandfather, which we moved into after the lease expired. With 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a converted garage, and a finished basement, there was work to be done, which I tackled with the help of a friend from high school who ran a construction business. Lee became pregnant, and at 22, we welcomed twin daughters, Betsy and Linda. While they were not identical, they certainly kept us on our toes. Lee took a year off, and I scaled back my work to care for the twins. Eventually, I transitioned to contractor status, allowing me to work from home while Lee returned to part-time work. As the girls grew, Lee resumed full-time work, while I balanced my contracting gigs with developing 2 potentially profitable systems. Lee's career thrived, and by the time the girls entered primary school at 13, we were financially stable. At 35, I stayed active with running and table tennis, both of which kept me in good shape. Despite being together for 15 years, our bed life remained enjoyable, though Lee seemed to question its vitality before the revelation about Big Al. I searched up Big Al's address, finding it about 3 miles north of our place. I pondered whether what I witnessed in Miami was recent or if it had been ongoing for some time. Other questions nagged at me as well. The day after I showed the girls the YouTube video, I requested DNA swabs from them and took one myself. It was Friday, and despite their need to attend school for tests and group sessions, I felt compelled to safeguard them from potential schoolyard confrontations. At 10, Lee rang. Seeing her name on the caller ID, I let it divert to voicemail. "Marty, please pick up," she pleaded. "Marty, I love you. I made a mistake. I'll be back this afternoon. Oh, damn. Her voice trailed off, punctuated by sobs. One of the upgrades I made to the house was installing an electronic entry system, and I changed the code. The converted garage sat unused but furnished, so I relocated Lee's belongings there, feeling it necessary. Both my mother and Lee's reached out, eager to know my plans. Uncertain myself, I could only convey as much. So I accessed Lee's Gmail account, scrolling through a month's worth of emails, both archived and current. Despite checking the trash folder, there was no correspondence with Big Al. A few messages pertained to work and the conference, with a couple offering some vague insights, but they were solely from a colleague attending the Miami event. Lee's flight was due to arrive at noon. Ignoring her calls, I enlisted a friend to monitor the airport, observing who disembarked from the plane and the ensuing dynamics. He spotted Lee exiting with her workmates, glancing around. He recorded a video on his phone, then proceeded to fetch her luggage, remaining at the exit. 5 minutes after others had deplaned, Big Al emerged. He too surveyed the area before heading to baggage claim. My friend trailed him while Lee waited for a taxi. Big Al approached her, speaking, but she shook her head, declining. A taxi pulled up, and the dispatcher ushered them both inside. My friend sent me a video. 20 minutes later, the taxi pulled up at the house, but only Lee emerged, visibly flustered. Discovering her access code didn't work, she knocked and rang the bell. I opened the door to find her in tears. "I'm so sorry, Marty. I never realized how much of a mess this would become," she sobbed. "You don't belong here, Lee. Your belongings are in the garage until you find somewhere else. Maybe Elle's house would suit you better." "Oh, Marty, there's nothing between us. I love you. You publicly humiliated me, made me a joke. Our daughter's at school. Who knows what they're dealing with? You're despicable. Get out of my sight." Her expression fell as she staggered away, eventually sitting on a chair in the yard, crying. Mrs. Cunningham, our neighbor, came out and comforted her. Lee eventually went to her house. I called Lee's mother, informing her that Lee was nearby and needed support. Ellen, her mother, wasn't very responsive, but agreed to come in an hour. I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, unable to envision what the future held. The night prior, I contacted a lawyer I knew who referred me to family law attorney Joan Ellis. I scheduled an appointment for the following Monday, and about 30 minutes later, Miss Ellis returned my call. "Mr. Martin, this is Joan Ellis. You've scheduled an appointment for Monday regarding your wife and the basketball player." "Yes, how did you know?" "The video doesn't identify her." "Who she is? The TV reporter found out. Big Al is making headlines, especially in the gossip columns." I figured there was no use delaying until Monday. "Can you come tomorrow morning, say at 10? "Yes, at 10. Please provide me with a brief overview of your relationship with your wife and with Mr. Johnson if you're acquainted. I'll also need financial statements if available." After wrapping up our conversation, she cautioned me against impulsive actions. As I hung up, the phone rang again. I answered automatically. It was Big Al. "Marty, I'm calling to try and apologize to you." "Freak you. I'll do everything in my power to make your life miserable." "Idiot." "Wow, it's not just me. Not just me, but her too. It just happened. I was happily married to her before she went to Miami. We have 2 kids. You're a complete prick. If you see me, run." I said it calmly, without yelling. There was no hint of emotion. There was a long pause on the other end. Then he hung up. But now I had his number. I accessed our phone account, checked the call log from Lee's phone, noting Elle's number. I only saw him after her arrival in Miami. Also, twice I couldn't access today's calls. I assumed their meeting in Miami was unplanned. Checking the Wiz schedule, they had an afternoon game in Miami on Wednesday. Big Al was the MC, so he was there on business. The doorbell chimed, and I peeked out to see my parents and in-laws. Lee was nowhere to be found. I ushered them in and offered drinks, which they declined before taking seats. Standing at the entrance to the living room, I addressed my mom, Lacey, who responded first. "We had a brief powwow on the street. We wanted to hear your thoughts," she began. I believe I let out a quiet yet distinct sob, straightening up as I looked at my mother. I guess she sensed my despair at that moment. Later, she mentioned that my gaze conveyed such devastation, melancholy, and pain that she couldn't fathom how anything could be reconciled. My dad inquired, "Is there a chance you could talk to Lee?" she asked when we were there. "For what? She won't have anything to say. She shattered our family. And it wasn't just one night, 3. She didn't even try to conceal it from her coworkers, and now the whole world knows," I replied bitterly. Ellen interjected, "I know she messed up, Marty. Big time, and she acknowledges that. But you have daughters, and you've loved each other for years. There's a lot to salvage if you can." "I don't see her as my wife anymore, and I never will. She's the mother of my kids, and that's it," I asserted. "You're hurting right now. Your pride took a blow. You need to get past it. Your marriage can't end over a few days," Ellen reasoned. "Ellen, I respect and care for you, but your daughter has caused irreparable injury. Please don't push for reconciliation. It's not happening," I insisted. She raised her hands in surrender, and I continued. "You all need to think about what life will look like post-divorce or when it's finalized." My mother burst into tears. "Just give it a few days, Marty, just a few. Your dad and I can take the kids for the weekend. Let's take them to the lake." I agreed, and right then, the girls got off the bus. They raced to the door, but with the code changed, they had to knock. They were surprised to see their grandparents and eager to share about their day. It wasn't all bad. Betsy mentioned her friend Sharon Davis, who had asked about the video. Linda didn't know much, and I filled them in. "We'll talk about it later," I reassured them. They weren't too upset. Linda asked about her mother, and Ellen explained she was next door. The girls were worried, but keen to see Lee. We sent them off to pack, though I was against them seeing her. The others felt it necessary. Once their bags were packed, Ellen fetched Lee, and they waited on the porch with their grandparents. Lee and Ellen approached. The girls didn't rush to her. They simply waited. From my bedroom window on the second floor, I could see and hear everything. Lee knelt before the girls, and they embraced. "Mom?" Linda queried. "What did you do? How could you be with that guy?" Her last words came out amidst sobs. "I made a terrible mistake. I need to understand why, but I still love you girls and your dad very much," Lee responded. Betsy, the tougher of the two, was unimpressed. "If you loved Dad, you wouldn't have done this. You let it all happen on video. How could you?" Tears streamed down her face now. Lee began to cry. I'm so sorry. It's a shame. It was a terrible mistake. Lee hugged Linda, but Betsy pushed her away. Lee stood up and fled to her father's car. My parents ushered the girls into their van, and everyone went their separate ways. I remained seated on my bed, stunned and sorrowful. Then rage consumed me. Anger surged through my veins. I thrashed and screamed. Finally, I descended to the basement and began pounding on the punching bag, each blow directed at Larry or Lee. Exhausted, my hands were red and raw. I resolved that they both deserved suffering, no matter what. After tending to my injured hands, I had a nightcap and retired to bed. Sleep eluded me for a while, but eventually it claimed me. The next morning, I went for an intense, lengthy run. Then I gathered my financial documents and headed to the lawyer's office. Joan Ellis turned out to be a woman in her 40s, slender with dark hair and eyes, dressed casually in jeans and a sweatshirt. We exchanged greetings and proceeded to the conference room. "I'm a bit underdressed, sorry. It's Saturday and I did some yard work," she apologized. "No problem. You look great," I reassured her. She smiled and led the way. I began, "Miss Ellis, I want to understand my options for divorcing my wife." "I can outline them for you, but are you certain you want a divorce?" "It's a difficult path, especially with 2 children, right?" she inquired. "Yes, the twins are 13, and I'd like to see custody," I confirmed. "Let's circle back to whether you truly want to end your marriage. Has something like the Miami incident happened before, or is this a one-time occurrence?" she probed. "I don't think she's strayed before, but I can't say for certain," I admitted. "So, if it's true, you can't reconcile with it," she summarized. "No," I replied firmly, without further elaboration. "All right, let's talk finances," I suggested. We delved into each other's earnings and responsibilities concerning the children. Joan was pleased to discover that the house was solely mine, acquired before marriage, and that the children had lived there their entire lives. She also noted that my role as a stay-at-home parent and our compatible work schedules could sway custody in my favor. However, she cautioned that nothing was guaranteed. I earned roughly the same as Lee, but my income was less stable, I informed her. Joan believed that neither of us would likely owe child support. "The non-custodial parent typically pays child support," she clarified. "I'm curious how soon we can initiate divorce proceedings," I inquired. "We could have the documents prepared and submitted within a week," Joan proposed. "I suggest waiting longer. People can change their minds and you may be required to undergo counseling. Is there a way to avoid that?" "I'd prefer not to have any direct conversations with her," I expressed. "You will need to have these discussions, but we can keep them to a minimum," Joan assured. "I noticed your hands are bandaged. What happened?" she inquired. "I got a bit upset last night and took it out on a punching bag. Forgot my gloves," I explained. "Well, at least you didn't visit Mr. Johnson or your wife. Speaking of which, is there a way to sue him for this? He should be held accountable," I remarked. "Unfortunately, in this state, there's no legal recourse for infidelity or alienation of affection. It used to be the case, but not anymore. I also checked Florida law, and there's no option there either. He's off the hook for now," Joan informed me. My tone remained steady, which seemed to unsettle Joan. "Let me see what I can do." "Just refrain from any violence, please," she requested. "No promises. That guy needs to pay. I won't rest easy if he gets away with this," I asserted. "Mr. Martin, I must inform you that while our conversations as your attorney are confidential, if I have reason to believe you're planning a violent act, I may have to report it, or not," Joan cautioned. "You won't ever have to worry about that," I assured her. "Thank you for saying that." I signed an agreement with her and paid the fee, urging her to expedite the document preparation. Upon returning home around noon, my father Leland called. "Hey, how are you holding up?" he greeted. "Fine," I replied. "I just left a lawyer's office," he continued. "Oh, what did they say?" I inquired. "We discussed the potential outcomes of a divorce." "Marty, you need to take your time with this. Don't rush into anything. This decision is crucial, and you shouldn't make it hastily," he advised. "Dad, the moment Lee slept with that idiot, it was over. The fact that she did it repeatedly makes it even worse. But once was enough. Mom thinks she hurt you so badly that there's no hope," I shared. "I suppose she might have a point, but still, I'd like you to take it slow, at least once. Lee should have a chance to explain everything," my father suggested. "What could she possibly say to change my mind?" I countered. There was silence for a while. Then he responded, "Okay, I can't think of anything," which is what needs to be proven. We discussed the girls' moods and emotions. Linda was deeply saddened and withdrawn, while Betsy was enraged and struggled to control herself. Mom works with both of them, reassuring them that they won't lose their parents and will always have us both, he shared. With that, we bid farewell. The home phone rang. Without caller ID, I let it go to voicemail. It was Lee. "Marty, if you're there, please pick up. I need to talk to you. Marty, I need this, please. I messed up and I know it. You're the only person I trust to discuss serious matters with. Will I lose you?" she pleaded. "No," I replied softly. "Please. I understand how angry and confused you must be. I'm truly sorry," she continued amidst tears, then hung up. As she spoke, tears streamed down my face. Once again, I descended to the basement, this time wearing gloves. Despite the pain, I relentlessly punched and kicked the bag until exhaustion consumed me. Afterward, I showered. Some men might turn to hard drinksel in such situations, but I chose to channel my emotions through physical activity like running or hitting the bag. I contemplated how to confront Larry. One persistent thought was the weapon I had found, a Taurus self-loading pistol 380. While jogging, its serial number had been erased, making it illegal, yet I kept it. I cleaned it and tested it at a shooting range. I entertained the idea of using it against Larry, but the thought of jeopardizing my freedom, especially for him, dissuaded me. I pushed aside such thoughts, realizing it wasn't the time for a conversation with Lee. However, the mere thought of facing her made me feel sick. Alone in the house, despair engulfed me, suffocating me like a heavy blanket. With a sudden surge of fear, I leaped from the sofa, feeling as though someone might consider me insane if they saw me. I knew I had to move, so I went for a brisk walk, which led me past Larry's house. I didn't linger, but noted the lack of security, further fueling my unease. The house, large and new, sat close to the street, boasting a basketball hoop in the driveway. Despite the absence of a car, a spacious garage loomed behind. I strolled past it, completing a loop, and snapped a few photos with my phone. Continuing northward, I passed Lee's parents' house, where their cars were parked at the entrance. Lee's car remained in our garage. Hurrying along, I entered a store and purchased a prepaid cell phone and a Diet Pepsi, then made my way back home. It was 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Upon returning home, I made myself a sandwich, though I likely consumed 3 slices. Once I stopped moving, the sense of anguish returned. Retrieving the 380, I drove out of town to a friend's property with an open shooting range, vacant as they were in Florida. I fired 2 boxes of cartridges with the pistol. Though affordable, the weapon was functional, albeit slightly heavier than ideal. On my way back, I stopped at the pharmacy and bought 2 neoprene thigh wraps. Back home, I fashioned a body bandage to secure the 380 caliber pistol around my lumbar region, testing its comfort during a run which proved satisfactory. My cell phone remained off all day, ignoring emails until I powered it on. 11 voicemails awaited me, along with around 20 text messages and numerous emails from family, colleagues, and friends, all urging me to reach out. Among them were messages from Lee, Ellen, and my mother, all echoing similar sentiments of needing to talk. However, Milt's messages stood out. In the first, he apologized for Lee's actions and for his failure to raise a responsible daughter. In the second, he proposed a conversation away from women. I dialed him, but it went to voicemail. I refrained from leaving a message, yet he promptly returned the call. "Marty, I needed to clear my head with a walk. What's going on?" "I saw you wanted to talk, Milt. Can we meet somewhere? How about Raymond Park, near the hops court?" "All right, in about 30 minutes. Sounds good." I donned my jeans and slipped the 380 into my pocket in case I encountered Larry, who lived half a mile from the park. After a 10-minute drive, I arrived early, finding Milt already there. We exchanged handshakes and settled on a bench beside the court. "I wanted to make sure you're all right. Ellen and your mom's words had me worried," Milt began. "I'm not all right, Milt. I feel worse than ever," I confessed. "Well, I recall how I felt when my mother passed. It took me a year to recover. I just kept working day after day." "That's what you should do too," he advised. "Easy to say, but damn hard to do. And it's only been a day," I countered. If it's any consolation, Lee is nearly catatonic. She hasn't eaten since arriving at our house, and she's barely said a word. We're considering getting her help, or maybe you. Oddly enough, you seem to be holding up better than her. Maybe it's the guilt. She has it, but you don't," Milt observed. "I'm sorry to hear that, Milt. Because the twins will need her. Need their mother," I expressed. "I don't understand why she is so amazed. Because she did everything openly. Did you really think that no one would know? That I wouldn't know? I cannot believe it. Sooner or later even." Even without YouTube, one of her employees, some of them my friends, would have caught wind of it. I don't think she was thinking straight at all. I think she may have suddenly found herself in a strange situation, away from her family and being stalked by a celebrity. So she succumbed to feelings that, in a normal situation, I would have suppressed. Here's what I can take away from it. You're so smart, Milt. But I think she had a thing for Larry since college and thought she could have her cake. And what are you going to do? I inquired. It's very, very likely that I will divorce her. Now I can't even think about her without anger and hostility. I hope I don't get sick because of all this, Milt responded. Look, I know everyone else is telling you to wait to decide something, am I? I just can't understand how you can go back to any semblance of a family life with her, I admitted. Yes, the case is lost. I'm going to wait, but not for long. You need to prepare her. If she's as bad as you say, I'll try, Milt concluded. And we parted ways. As I walked back to my car, parked on a nearby street, I noticed Larry dribbling a basketball up the intersecting street toward the court. I saw him and instinctively reached for my weapon. Milt, driving towards him, noticed him too, and honked the horn. Larry got startled and lost control of the ball as it rolled down the street. He recklessly chased after it without looking, resulting in a fatal accident. It wasn't Milt who hit him. A car traveling in the opposite direction struck Larry, launching him over the hood and windshield before he fell onto the street. Milt drove past the scene. I rushed to Larry's side. He was alive, but barely conscious. As I looked at him, I felt a mix of emotions, including betrayal. Paramedics arrived shortly after, but despite their efforts, they couldn't save him. The police arrived, and although I was nervous about my illegal weapon, I cooperated and was released without issue. About an hour later, I disposed of the weapon and drove to Milt's house to discuss the tragic accident. Arriving at the house, I rang the bell, and Ellen answered. Seeing my emotional state, she asked if I wanted to see Lee. No, too early, Milt, I replied, indicating that I needed to speak with Milt first. Milt went downstairs. I waved to him, and we departed. Milt, Big Al is dead, I informed him. Damn, did you eliminate him? I saw you had a weapon, Milt responded with concern. God, Marty, but he didn't look the way he should have. If he was truly upset, Milt continued. I didn't eliminate him. He got hit by a car after you honked at him. He missed his basketball and ran outside after it like a child. I saw him die, I clarified, unable to contain a smile. It's clear. Accident. God works in mysterious ways. I'll leave it to you or Ellen to tell Lee that her boyfriend died, I said. He's not her boyfriend, but we'll let her know. I guess it'll be all over the news, Milt replied. Certainly. How is she? I inquired. Also not good. On the contrary, you look upbeat, Milt observed. I even felt deceived when he died. But then I saw this as a saving grace. Marty, I want to save my daughter. I think she's heading into the abyss. I know she screwed up, but I love her, and I want her to have a life. Therefore, I ask you, if you see a way, at least do not interfere. Maybe later you can lend a helping hand, Milt requested earnestly. It's a difficult request, but I ask, Milt. I have to think about this. If we talk to her too soon, I won't be able to help. You have to keep her away from me. Let me think it over. I'll try to find a way out, I promised. Congratulations on escaping homicide, Milt remarked with a chuckle as we laughed and returned to the house. I left by car. That night I slept. The girls called me and we had a good talk. Then I just went to bed. On Sunday, I became depressed again. It was a nice day and I had nothing better to do than think about the state of my marriage. No matter what Milt said, I knew Lee and I could never be together again. This made me sad, but it is true. I did another long run, walked down to the shopping center along the river, and returned home. I showered and went to see my parents and kids for a Sunday picnic. The twins were in a better mood. They had a conference call with Lee, who must have perked up because she was encouraging them. I've wondered this. Mom said there was no mention of Big Al, Lee's infidelity, or Larry's pass away. Only talk about school. Lee told the girls she would see them as soon as she got better. I had a good time with my parents and girls. While they were in the pool, I told my parents that I saw Big Al get hit and die. They were shocked. My father said, "You didn't have anything, you know?" "No, it's a coincidence. I was in that park with Milt talking. He just drove off and Larry got hit. He rushed outside to get his ball." "Fine. Well, I can't say I'm sorry. May the Lord have mercy on his soul." We changed the subject. Joan Ellis called me on Monday. First, I wanted to know how I felt about Larry's pass away. She didn't know I was there. My name was not published. I told her the whole story and she was amazed, maybe a little suspicious. I know that if I were her, I would be suspicious too. She then said that the documents would be ready on Wednesday and asked me to let me know when I wanted them to be served. I told her to wait a little because Lee was in bad shape. I made a promise of sorts to Milt. The kids decided to go to school. Even though Big Al's pass away and his outburst the week before were big news, I was left alone and decided to work. Working half a day for the army for 2 or 3 hours. I went about my business. Then I picked up the girls from school. After their extra classes, we ate pizza. It was something I could make myself and they loved my pizza. We had a pleasant evening, but before going to bed, both of them inquired about their mother's return. I responded truthfully, I doubt we'll have the same agreements as before. The future is uncertain, but I don't see us reverting to how things used to be. There's something else awaiting us, but we'll always love both of you. Milt called on Tuesday, followed by Ellen. They wanted to meet, so I agreed to meet them at Starbucks. While grabbing our drinks, Milt mentioned he'd contacted a marriage counselor and suggested I engage with Lee. Ellen added that if we proceed with divorce on the grounds of infidelity, the court would likely mandate counseling anyway. Okay, I replied. But I won't deceive. Even if we dive into this and explore deeper, I still doubt it'll benefit her. Ellen reassured, we're not asking you to deceive. Just take it slow. Listen to the psychologist. Communicate with Lee. Otherwise, she may face significant challenges. We didn't disclose that you were present during Big Al's accident. The first session was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 in the morning. I arrived punctually, preferring not to wait in the same room as Lee. The consultant was Sylvia Price, a psychologist and certified marriage and family counselor, a woman in her 50s, slightly plump but amiable. She ushered us into her office. Until then, Lee and I hadn't exchanged a word. She appeared unwell, pale, and kept rubbing her hands. Dr. Price briefed us on her practice, including handling cases of infidelity. She asked about my counseling goal. I aim to move forward in life and remain a good father to my children. However, I don't believe reconciliation in marriage is feasible, I stated. Lee, what are your goals? Dr. Price inquired. I wish to reclaim my former life. It may not be possible, but I desire to remain Marty's wife, even if things aren't the same, Lee responded. Dr. Price surveyed each of us. As I understand it, Lee attended a work conference in Miami where she reconnected with a man from her university days, and they spent several nights together, Dr. Price remarked. Lee affirmed this. I couldn't fathom that our Miami affair would become public knowledge. I assumed it would only be during my absence from the family. Dr. Price probed further. If that's the case, why did you go dancing with Mr. Johnson? You must have known he was a public figure. Lee explained. I thought it would be enjoyable. It wasn't near the hotel. Actually, it was fun. But I knew Hughes, my colleague, would find out about us, and of course, I realized Marty would soon learn too. Perhaps not as quickly as he actually did. Let's set that aside for now, Dr. Price redirected. Marty, could you explain why you're convinced the marriage is over? I gazed directly at Lee, the person I loved and trusted the most in this world. When I witnessed her readiness to betray me so readily and openly, I was devastated. My grandparents died in an accident, and I endured immense pain for a long time. But nothing compares to this. Never have I experienced such devastation. If Lee could do this to me, then anyone could. I could never grant her or anyone else that level of control again. Lee openly wept as I voiced this. I wanted to express that I would never trust her again. How do you feel seeing her like this? I'm just sorrowful and also extremely furious. It was so outrageously cruel to me and to our children as well. Even if it was done out of foolishness, without the intention to inflict pain. It was so wrong. And for what? 3 nights with some guy you fancied in college? I gazed directly at her. When I asked this, Lee sobbed. No, I don't know why I did it. Dr. Price intervened. Lee, calm down. Is it true that you had romantic feelings for Mr. Johnson back in college? Yes, he was this big, handsome, famous guy. He pursued me persistently, but I was with Marty and I declined. So I asked, then why did you agree? Leading up to Miami, I felt a bit disconnected for a few months. We've all been so occupied. I was looking forward to a few days in Miami, thinking it might re-energize me. But as soon as I arrived, I saw Larry. He hugged me tightly, and I realized that I wouldn't resist if he made a move. Everything happened so fast. I can't make sense of it, I remarked. We had amazing lovemaking the night before you left, didn't we? Or were you just pretending? No, it was genuine. It kept me tingling throughout the flight. Damn, I feel awful. Lee began crying again. My tears flowed too, but my seething anger returned. I didn't believe I could contain it, so I stood up and walked to the outer office. I was about to lash out at the furniture when Dr. Price came out. Why don't you take a moment in the men's room? I'll talk to Lee alone first. Then I'll speak with you in private. That's exactly what I did. The two of them spent about 15 minutes together. Lee emerged no longer crying. Sorry, Marty. With that, she left, and Dr. Price asked me, Marty, how do you feel about Mr. Johnson's pass away? You know, I was there and saw him die, and I felt relieved that he died. I could have done it myself, but he was eliminated first. It's ugly, but it's the truth. And now the same thing, maybe even worse. This guy ruined my whole life over some nonsense. I felt cheated that I couldn't end him. Why does Lee's affair with Larry spell the ruin of your entire life? I was a devoted family man, nothing more. What I said about betrayal, I'll never get over it. I can't fathom trusting anyone again. Lee shattered that trust. But it's only been a few days. Let me ask, have you considered how intense the closeness was between Lee and Larry? Yes, I saw on YouTube that they were completely consumed by desire for each other. And how did it make you feel? Betrayed. It was the ultimate betrayal. Lee, no matter what happens, she'll always have the memory of her steamy affair. If we had stayed married, I'd always suspect she was thinking of him during our carnal moments. You know, I want to erase that memory for her, and I fully intend to. It's the least I can do. A tough situation. This is someone you deeply love. I truly loved her deeply in the past. That's why it hurts so much. She gutted me. That concludes the session. She asked me to think about what living arrangements could be made if we separated history.
I was tasked with presenting the details about my trip to Miami and why I felt vulnerable. I also outlined potential paths to reconciliation between Marty and me before heading to Miami. I felt out of sorts, no longer finding enjoyment in the things I once loved. Work had become monotonous, and family life followed suit. This had been the case for several months now, leaving me with a vague sense of stagnation. I eagerly anticipated my trip to Miami. One coworker, Brady Bean, had been persistently pursuing me since he transferred to our office. Despite my efforts to brush him off for months, treating him as a joke, he remained undeterred. While he wasn't Adonis, he was good-looking and cheerful. His continued advances didn't offend me. Rather, I was flattered, although I made it clear I wasn't interested. However, I knew I had an effect on him, which bolstered my ego. I entertained the idea but never intended to act on it, considering it too risky, even if he were exceptionally attractive, which he wasn't. However, at our hotel check-in, Larry appeared. He was undeniably attractive. His enthusiastic hug caught me off guard, and I realized he could seduce me if he tried. He seemed to understand this too because he wasted no time. Taking me aside, he asked if Marty was with me. When I said no, he informed me he had a hotel room until Friday and expressed his desire for me. Convinced I felt the same. I agreed to dinner with him. I can't fully explain why I succumbed so easily, feeling like a fool. Marty and I had passionate lovemaking the night before, leaving me on edge, a feeling Larry seemed to share. I didn't consider the consequences if Marty found out I cheated, or if I did, it was fleeting. I convinced myself I was in a different world for those few days. At dinner, Larry and I both knew where the evening would lead. We skipped dessert and went straight to his room. He pulled me close, and we quickly shed our clothes, consumed by desire. There was no time for foreplay. He took me to his bed, and we were carnal for a long time. After experiencing multiple climaxes, I lost consciousness briefly, only to be awakened by his kiss, signaling the start of round 2. This pattern continued into the next morning. I missed breakfast with the team and barely made it to the meeting. I felt physically satisfied, and I suspected my colleagues noticed, though there were no direct comments. I entertained the thought that someone might inform Marty, but dismissed it. They're clueless. It's all speculation. The closeness with Larry was unparalleled, possibly due to the distance from home and the freedom from family obligations, coupled with his muscular physique. Plus, he seemed as eager for me as I was for him. He could have had any woman, yet he chose me. My desire for him was overwhelming. After a work meeting, I reached out to him. We went straight to his room, spent 2 hours making love, then ordered room service, followed by more closeness. The following morning brought the same curious glances. A bit uneasy, I met Larry in his room at 5 p.m., and we remained in bed until 8. The passion was still intense, but not quite as electric as the first 2 nights. Room service delivered our meals. Then he suggested we go dancing, which we did. That's how we ended up on YouTube. I watched our video knowing full well Marty had seen it. That night, I realized what Marty saw, a faithful wife openly lusting after another man. After dancing, we returned to the hotel for more closeness. The next morning, with a flight looming, Larry and I made love again, showered and dressed. We had breakfast in his room before I returned to mine to pack. My roommate Cindy mentioned seeing me dance on YouTube, calling it spicy. Horror engulfed me. I knew I was done for. Then I ran into Bart Kovach, Marty's close friend. On the airport bus, I asked if Marty had called during my Miami trip. We hadn't been in touch. Bart informed me Marty had seen the YouTube video, knowing I spent every night with Larry. Speechless, the flight home was excruciating. No one wanted to speak to me. Sitting by the window, a stranger occupied the adjacent seat. I knew Larry was on the flight, but didn't spot him. Disembarking, I scanned for Larry in vain. He approached me at baggage claim, asking if I'd be okay. I replied it would likely never be the same. He seemed downcast. Unprepared for Marty to pick me up, I queued for a taxi. When I boarded, the dispatcher seated Larry with me. We were dropped off near each other. In the cab, Larry apologized for the YouTube incident, admitting he hadn't thought it through. I declined conversation, asking the driver to drop Larry off first. Back home, unable to face Marty's devastated and enraged expression, I fled. Since then, I've stayed with my parents. I'm in a near constant daze. Attempting to talk to the girls was futile. Betsy rebuffed me, understandably. Phone calls were a bit better, though it took an hour to muster the courage. Now I attend counseling sessions. After that initial counseling session, I felt like my marriage had reached its end, heavily influenced by Marty's candid expression of his emotions. Now I'm grappling with how to navigate his anger and sorrow. I'm at a loss as to how I could possibly earn back his trust. I know I don't deserve him. And then there's Larry. He's gone, eliminated in a car accident. When my mother broke the news, I felt immense sorrow. During our taxi ride, Larry urged me to call him. Truthfully, I could have, but he's no longer here. That absence adds to my sense of emptiness. If I ever were to be carnal with another man, I'm certain memories of my time with Larry would linger. However, now I'm not so sure. I can't shake the feeling that if I had turned him down, he might still be alive. It doesn't make logical sense, yet it feels that way. I feel utterly lost. There's a gradual improvement on the home front, although the struggles persist. The twins are coping with school, but it's been a challenge. Betsy's anger lingers, and Linda deeply feels her mother's absence. Despite our nightly teleconferencing, it's hard to gauge Lee's progress from our brief calls. During our second counseling session, each of us had an individual session before coming together. Dr. Price prompted us to consider what might facilitate reconciliation. While I couldn't envision a path to rebuilding trust, I pondered if understanding Lee's motives for her affair could pave the way. However, I remained skeptical of her remorse. Reflecting on her actions, it seems Lee sought a fleeting thrill without considering the consequences. But I can't shake the feeling that perhaps she wanted to be caught, signaling deeper issues. Despite her pleas for forgiveness, I find it difficult to believe her sincerity. Even if Lee genuinely apologized and explained her actions, I'm uncertain if I could continue our relationship. It feels like I'm standing beside a ticking time bomb. Consequently, I've made the decision to proceed with filing for divorce. Today, amidst the weight of divorce papers landing on my doorstep, I found myself reflecting on the evolution of my marriage. Marty's demeanor in our recent counseling session revealed a subtle shift, a resigned acceptance, perhaps, of the inevitable end. This acknowledgement marked a pivotal moment in our journey, signaling the beginning of the end. As I returned to the workplace, the atmosphere was chilling, with colleagues casting judgmental glances and even Brady Bean distancing himself, a stark reminder of the fallout from my actions. Consulting with my lawyer, I navigated the murky waters of custody arrangements, grappling with the reality that Marty's primary role as the homeowner would likely grant him greater custody rights. Despite the emotional turmoil, I opted for transparency, confessing my infidelity to expedite the legal proceedings. Remarkably, neither Marty nor I harbored animosity over financial matters, a testament, perhaps, to the deeper wounds our marriage suffered. Reflecting on my affair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment from Larry's role in it. While I acknowledge my own culpability, I also recognize his part in the betrayal. Dr. Price's probing into my behavior hinted at an underlying desire for excitement, but the reality is far from liberating. Instead, I find myself grappling with a profound sense of loss and emptiness, manifested in my waning appetite for both food and closeness. Despite the allure of a potentially freer existence, I'm left feeling adrift, disconnected from the social scene, and disinterested in the advances of others. As I navigate this tumultuous period, I'm left pondering the duration of this melancholy, wondering when, or if, I'll find solace amidst the wreckage of my shattered marriage.
Today, the divorce proceedings reached their conclusion, granting me primary custody of the twins, while Lee will have visitation rights every other weekend, 2 weeks during the summer and during Thanksgiving or Christmas. Despite the separation, we've maintained a semblance of routine for the girls, ensuring they receive 2 gifts for each holiday, with the Christmas haul potentially expanding. Our living arrangements mirror the past 6 months, with Lee residing a mere 2 miles away in her own apartment. I've extended an open invitation to Milt and Ellen, who frequently visit, ensuring they maintain a connection with the girls during Lee's weekends. As for my personal life, I've cautiously dipped my toes into the dating pool, casually socializing with divorced acquaintances, including 3 women from our former circle of friends. These encounters are lighthearted, typically consisting of dinners or bowling outings, underscored by a clear understanding of my reluctance to commit to anything serious. While some may hold out hope for my eventual healing, I remain skeptical, acknowledging the enduring pain inflicted by Lee's betrayal. The mere thought of her with that other man still haunts me, a wound that refuses to fully heal despite my best efforts to suppress it. The twins, meanwhile, are adjusting to the new normal, with Linda displaying kindness towards Lee, while Betsy harbors lingering resentment, mirroring my own guarded nature. This dynamic remains unspoken between Lee and me, as communication between us has dwindled to a minimum, driven by my desire to minimize painful encounters. Despite Ellen's concerns for Lee's well-being, I find it difficult to summon any sympathy, still grappling with the unanswered questions surrounding her actions. It's a chapter of my life I'm eager to close, yet its impact lingers, a constant reminder of betrayal and shattered trust. It's tempting to attribute everything to a series of unlikely coincidences. Lee's vague discontent, the opportunity to go to Miami, and, crucially, her meeting with Larry, all converge to unravel the marriage. It's a dead end, a point of no return. Update. 1 year later, Milt Moore found himself on the golf course, his regular foursome disrupted by the presence of an old school friend, Fred Cunningham. As they strolled from the 9th tee, they broached a personal conversation, one they hadn't dared to discuss over the phone. "How are you holding up these days, Fred?" Milt inquired. "I'm managing," Fred replied, his tone tinged with resignation. "I decided to confront it head on. I followed him from his house, just as you suggested. It was also routine, his Saturday afternoon golfing ritual, even after retirement. It was a shock to read about it in the papers. I never imagined he'd dart into the street like that, but I knew I had to act." Milt nodded in understanding. "Your honk likely startled him. It shook me to the core as well. It felt like divine intervention protecting Marty in the nick of time. But seeing him die, witnessing it firsthand, I was stunned. I called emergency immediately. And Marty, he was right there. It left me questioning everything." "I knew Marty carried a weapon," Fred admitted somberly. "I feared he'd take matters into his own hands eventually. He had a right to feel cheated, but did Larry deserve to die? It's hard to say. What's clear is that Marty and the girls deserved to live. As did Lee. It's a heavy burden to bear." Their conversation trailed off, unspoken words hanging in the air. They walked in silence, side by side, each grappling with their own thoughts, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of their shared secret.